Emily parked her car in front of the old country house, taking in the overgrown garden and faded exterior. The house had an unsettling aura, but she shrugged it off as pre-writing jitters. This secluded place was perfect for finishing her novel. As she stepped inside, the wooden floors creaked under her feet. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through the grimy windows. She set her bags down and began exploring. The house was bigger than she expected, with numerous rooms filled with antique furniture covered in white sheets. A chill ran down her spine as she walked through the empty halls. She heard a faint whispering, but when she turned around, there was no one there. Emily shook her head, attributing it to her imagination. That night, as she sat at her desk typing away, the whispering returned, louder this time. Emily froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She glanced around the room, but saw nothing. Determined to ignore it, she continued writing. But the whispers grew insistent, forming words she couldn't quite understand. Her heart pounded in her chest. The noises escalated. Soft footsteps, doors creaking open and shut, and a persistent tapping on the window. Emily's unease grew with each passing minute. She decided to call it a night and head to bed. As she lay in the unfamiliar bed, the whispers seemed to surround her, echoing in her ears. Sleep eluded her, and she found herself staring at the ceiling, wondering what secrets this old house held. Emily's restlessness led her to explore the house further the next morning. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, she discovered an old, dusty journal hidden in a drawer. Curious, she opened it and began to read. The journal belonged to a man named Henry, who had been the caretaker of the house many years ago. Henry's entries started off mundane, detailing daily tasks and upkeep of the property. However, as Emily read on, the entries grew darker. Henry described hearing whispers, much like the ones Emily had heard, and seeing shadows moving in the corners of his vision. He wrote about a growing sense of dread and the feeling of being watched. Emily felt a chill as she realized Henry's experiences mirrored her own. She continued reading, captivated and horrified. Henry's last entry spoke of a hidden room in the basement, a place he felt drawn to, but also feared. He mentioned seeing a figure in the mirrors and feeling a cold hand touch his shoulder when he was alone. Determined to uncover more, Emily decided to investigate the basement. She hoped to find the hidden room Henry mentioned, and maybe even some answers. Her heart pounded as she made her way down the creaky stairs, flashlight in hand, the journal clutched tightly in the other. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old, forgotten items. Emily took a deep breath and started her search. Emily's flashlight cut through the darkness as she navigated the basement. The air was damp, and cobwebs brushed against her face. She moved boxes and old furniture, searching for any sign of the hidden room. After what felt like hours, she noticed a faint outline of a door behind a large, dusty cabinet. With considerable effort, she managed to push the cabinet aside, revealing a narrow wooden door. Her hands trembled as she turned the handle and pushed it open. Inside, she found a small room filled with antique furniture covered in dust and a large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall. The temperature dropped instantly, and Emily's breath came out in visible puffs. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread as she stepped inside. Her flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Emily approached the mirror, her reflection barely visible through the grime. Suddenly, she saw a figure standing behind her in the mirror. She spun around, but no one was there. Heart pounding, she remembered Henry's journal. He had written about seeing a figure in the mirrors and feeling a cold hand on his shoulder. Emily turned back to the mirror, and the figure reappeared, its face twisted in a silent scream. She stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight, which rolled away and left her in near darkness. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with a cacophony of voices. Terrified, Emily fled the basement, vowing never to return. She knew she had to find a way to end this haunting before it consumed her completely. Emily spent the next day researching the house and its history, hoping to find a way to break the haunting. She discovered that Henry, the caretaker, had vanished without a trace, and the house had remained abandoned ever since. Desperate for answers, she reached out to a local historian who knew about the house's dark past. The historian told her about the previous owner, a reclusive man obsessed with the occult. He had conducted rituals in the hidden basement room, believing he could communicate with spirits. The historian warned Emily that the rituals might have opened a gateway, trapping restless spirits in the house. Armed with this knowledge, Emily returned to the basement that night, determined to end the haunting. She brought Henry's journal, hoping it contained the key to closing the gateway. As she read aloud the final entries, she felt a cold presence enveloping her. The whispers grew deafening, but she pressed on. Following the journal's instructions, Emily performed the ritual backward, reciting the incantations in reverse. The room seemed to pulse with energy, and the temperature plummeted. Shadows danced wildly on the walls as she completed the final step. Suddenly, the room fell silent, and the oppressive cold lifted. Emily felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She knew she had succeeded in freeing the trapped spirits, including Henry. Exhausted but triumphant, she made her way back upstairs. The house was still and peaceful, the haunting finally over. Emily packed her things, ready to leave the house and its dark past behind. Emily packed her belongings quickly, eager to leave the house now that the haunting had ended. As she loaded her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The whispers were gone, but the memory of them lingered. She took one last look at the house, now seemingly just an old, empty building. Driving away, she felt a mix of relief and sorrow for the spirits she had encountered. She hoped they had found peace. As the house disappeared in her rearview mirror, Emily's thoughts turned to her novel. The experience had given her a new perspective and a wealth of material to write about. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. Back in her city apartment, Emily settled into her writing routine with a fresh outlook. The words flowed easily, and she quickly finished her novel. The story of the haunted caretaker and the old country house captivated her readers, earning rave reviews. Despite her success, Emily couldn't forget the time she spent in that eerie house. She often wondered if the spirits truly found peace, or if some remnants of the past still lingered. Occasionally, she would feel a cold draft or hear a faint whisper, but she dismissed them as tricks of her imagination. Years later, Emily received a letter from the new owner of the house. They thanked her for her novel, which had helped them understand the history of the place. They mentioned that the house was now peaceful with no signs of hauntings. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of closure. She had not only finished her novel, but also helped lay restless spirits to rest. Mark and Lisa arrived at the old country house just as the sun was setting. The house stood isolated, surrounded by dense woods. It had an air of abandonment, with its peeling paint and overgrown yard, but they found it charming in a rustic way. They had booked the house for a weekend getaway, hoping to escape their hectic city lives. Inside, the house was filled with antique furniture and old photographs. As they unpacked, Mark found a box of letters and family photos tucked away in a dusty corner. The photos showed a happy family, a couple with 2 children, posing in front of the house. The letters, however, told a different story. They spoke of strange occurrences, fear, and a sense of being watched. That night, as Mark and Lisa sat by the fireplace, they heard faint footsteps upstairs. Mark dismissed it as the house settling, but Lisa felt uneasy. She suggested they explore the upstairs rooms to put her mind at ease. Reluctantly, Mark agreed. Upstairs, they found more evidence of the family who once lived there. Children's toys were scattered in one room, and an old, tattered teddy bear lay on a bed. Lisa picked it up, feeling a chill run down her spine. Suddenly, they heard a door creak open down the hall. With a flashlight in hand, they cautiously approached the source of the noise. The door to the master bedroom was ajar, revealing a dark room. They stepped inside, and the temperature seemed to drop. A feeling of dread washed over them as they realized they were not alone. In the master bedroom, Mark and Lisa's flashlight beam revealed old, faded wallpaper and an empty bed frame. The air felt heavy, and an unsettling silence filled the room. Suddenly, Lisa gasped as she saw a faint outline of a figure in the corner. Mark turned the flashlight, but there was nothing there. Lisa's unease grew, but Mark tried to reassure her. They decided to return downstairs, hoping to shake off the eerie feeling. As they descended the stairs, they heard a soft, childlike giggle echoing through the hall. Lisa clutched Mark's arm, her fear palpable. Back in the living room, they huddled together on the couch, trying to make sense of what they had experienced. Mark suggested they leave the house in the morning, but Lisa wasn't sure they would make it through the night. The sense of being watched intensified, and shadows seemed to move just beyond their vision. As they discussed their plans, the giggling returned, this time closer. Lisa's heart raced as she saw the apparition of a little girl standing by the fireplace, her eyes wide with fear. She seemed to be trying to say something, but no sound came out. Mark saw her too, and they both froze in terror. The girl pointed towards the attic door, her expression pleading. Then as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished. Mark and Lisa exchanged a terrified glance. They knew they had to find out what was in the attic. Gathering their courage, they decided to investigate, hoping to uncover the truth behind the haunting. With trepidation, Mark and Lisa approached the attic door. It was old and creaky, covered in dust and cobwebs. Mark reached for the handle, and as he turned it, the door opened with a loud groan. A cold draft hit them, and they hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The attic was dimly lit by a small window, and it was filled with old furniture and boxes. In the center of the room, they saw a small, dusty rocking chair slowly moving back and forth, as if recently disturbed. Their flashlight beam caught a glimpse of something shiny on the floor, a locket. Lisa picked it up and opened it, revealing a picture of the little girl and her family. As they stood there, the temperature dropped even further, and the whispers began. They couldn't make out the words, but the tone was filled with urgency and sorrow. Lisa felt a tug on her sleeve and saw the ghostly figure of the little girl standing beside her. The girl pointed to a large, old trunk in the corner of the attic. Mark and Lisa exchanged a nervous glance before approaching the trunk. They opened it and found it filled with the family's belongings: clothes, toys, and letters. Among the items was a diary belonging to the mother. Lisa began to read the final entries, which detailed the family's increasing fear and the strange occurrences that plagued their last days in the house. The diary mentioned a dark presence that seemed to target the little girl, and the family's desperate attempts to protect her. Mark and Lisa realized they had to help the girl find peace to end the haunting. With the diary in hand, Mark and Lisa read about the family's final days. The mother had written about a protective amulet hidden in the house, believed to ward off the dark presence. Determined to find it, they searched the attic thoroughly, but came up empty-handed. Lisa suggested they check the rest of the house for clues. As they moved through the darkened rooms, the atmosphere grew heavier, and the whispers became louder. In the children's room, they found a small, ornate box under the bed. Inside was the amulet, a silver pendant with strange engravings. Just as Lisa picked up the amulet, the dark presence manifested. The temperature plummeted and shadows converged, forming a menacing figure. Mark and Lisa felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The figure advanced, and the house seemed to close in on them. Desperately, Lisa held up the amulet, chanting a protection prayer she remembered from the diary. The dark figure recoiled, and the whispers turned into anguished screams. The amulet glowed brightly, casting the shadows away. The figure dissipated, and the room grew still. The little girl's apparition appeared once more, smiling gratefully at them. She reached out, touching the amulet, and then slowly faded away. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and a sense of peace filled the house. Mark and Lisa knew they had freed the family from the dark presence. Exhausted but relieved, they decided to leave immediately. As they drove away, they saw the house in their rearview mirror, now just an old, quiet building. Mark and Lisa drove away from the house, the weight of their experience pressing heavily on their minds. They remained silent, each lost in their thoughts about the eerie events they had just survived. As they reached the outskirts of the town, Lisa broke the silence, expressing her relief that they had helped the family find peace. Over the next few days, Mark and Lisa tried to return to their normal routines, but the haunting memories lingered. They couldn't shake the feeling that the house had left a mark on them. Despite this, they felt a sense of closure, knowing they had freed the spirits trapped within its walls. A few weeks later, Lisa received an unexpected letter from the new owners of the house. They thanked her and Mark for their help, explaining that they had sensed a significant change in the atmosphere. The house, once filled with darkness and fear, now felt peaceful and welcoming. The new owners expressed their gratitude, saying they could finally turn it into a loving home. Mark and Lisa felt a profound sense of relief. They had not only survived a terrifying ordeal, but also made a difference. The experience brought them closer together, strengthening their bond. Reflecting on their adventure, they realized how much they had grown. The haunted house was now a chapter of their past, one that taught them about courage, resilience, and the importance of confronting fears. As they looked toward the future, they knew they were ready to face whatever challenges came their way, together. Jack arrived at the old country house with a sense of excitement. He had inherited the property from a distant relative and couldn't wait to explore its hidden treasures. The house, though aged and worn, held a charm that intrigued him. He spent the first day going through the rooms, discovering antique furniture, paintings, and dusty old books. As night fell, Jack's curiosity led him to the attic. It was cluttered with old trunks and forgotten belongings. One item in particular caught his eye, an ornate antique mirror. It was beautifully crafted, with intricate designs along the frame. Despite its allure, the mirror had a dark, unsettling presence. Jack decided to clean it up and bring it downstairs. That night, he placed the mirror in his bedroom, admiring its craftsmanship. As he turned off the lights and got into bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air grew cold, and he thought he heard faint whispers, but he dismissed it as his imagination. Around midnight, Jack woke to the sound of soft tapping. He glanced around, and his eyes landed on the mirror. In its reflection, he saw shadowy figures moving behind him. He quickly turned, but the room was empty. Unease settled over him as he lay back down, staring at the ceiling, trying to rationalize what he had seen. The tapping continued, and he felt a cold breeze brush past him. The figures in the mirror seemed to grow clearer, their faces twisted in silent agony. Jack knew then that the mirror was no ordinary heirloom. It held a dark secret, one that he had to uncover before it consumed him. The next morning, Jack woke up feeling uneasy. Determined to understand the strange occurrences, he decided to research the mirror's origins. He spent the day rummaging through the house, hoping to find clues. In the library, he discovered an old, leather-bound book with the family crest on the cover. The book detailed the history of the house and its previous owners. It mentioned the mirror and its dark reputation. According to the book, the mirror had been crafted by an infamous occultist who believed it could capture and imprison souls. Over the years, many owners reported seeing ghostly apparitions and experiencing unexplainable phenomena. As Jack read on, he learned about the tragic fate of his ancestors who had owned the mirror. Each one had met a mysterious and untimely end. The last entry was from a woman named Eleanor, who wrote about seeing her deceased family members in the mirror, pleading for help. Determined to get to the bottom of this, Jack decided to confront the mirror that night. As darkness fell, he steeled himself and entered his bedroom. The mirror stood ominously in the corner, its surface reflecting more than just his image. He could see the faint outlines of figures trapped within, their eyes full of despair. Jack approached the mirror, his heart pounding. He placed his hand on the cold glass and whispered, "What do you want?" The room grew colder, and the figures became clearer. Suddenly, a force pulled him towards the mirror, and he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He knew he had to act fast to break the mirror's curse before it was too late. Determined to end the haunting, Jack searched the book for a way to break the curse. He found a ritual described by Eleanor, meant to release the trapped souls. The ritual required specific items: salt, candles, and a personal belonging of the deceased. Jack gathered the materials, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. That night, he prepared for the ritual. He drew a circle of salt around the mirror and placed candles at its corners. The room was dimly lit, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows. Jack took a deep breath and began reciting the incantations from the book, his voice trembling. As he chanted, the mirror's surface began to ripple like water. The figures inside grew more distinct, their faces contorted with fear and anguish. Jack held up an old pocket watch he had found among the family heirlooms, believing it belonged to Eleanor. He placed it at the base of the mirror, hoping it would help free the trapped souls. The air grew colder, and a powerful force seemed to emanate from the mirror. The figures inside pressed their hands against the glass as if trying to break free. Jack continued chanting, his voice growing stronger with determination. The candles flickered wildly, and the room shook as the mirror's surface shimmered. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the room, and the mirror shattered, pieces flying in all directions. The trapped souls were released, their ghostly forms dissipating into the air. The room fell silent, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Jack collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. The curse was finally broken. Jack sat on the floor, surrounded by shards of the broken mirror. The room was still and quiet, the oppressive chill replaced by a warm, comforting air. He felt a sense of relief wash over him, knowing the curse was broken and the trapped souls were finally free. Gathering his strength, he began to clean up the mess. As he carefully picked up the pieces of glass, he found a small, hidden compartment behind where the mirror had hung. Inside was an old, weathered letter. It was from Eleanor, addressed to anyone who might find it. Jack sat down and read her words, which detailed her own struggles with the cursed mirror and her desperate attempt to break the curse. Eleanor's letter expressed hope that one day someone would succeed where she had failed. She thanked whoever found the letter for their bravery and wished them a life free from the mirror's darkness. Jack felt a deep connection to her, grateful for her guidance through the ritual. Feeling a sense of closure, Jack decided to honor his ancestors by restoring the house. He spent the next few weeks repairing and renovating, transforming the once haunted house into a warm and inviting home. He removed the remaining items associated with the occultist and replaced them with family memorabilia that carried positive memories. As the house transformed, so did Jack's life. He felt lighter, unburdened by the curse that had plagued his family for generations. The mirror was gone, and with it, the dark presence that had haunted them. Jack knew he had turned a new page, ready to embrace a future filled with peace and happiness. Jack's efforts to restore the house were finally complete. The old country home now radiated warmth and charm, a stark contrast to its former eerie presence. Friends and family visited, praising the transformation and the newfound peace that seemed to envelop the place. One evening, as Jack sat by the fireplace, he felt a sense of accomplishment. The house was no longer a relic of fear, but a symbol of resilience and renewal. He thought about the journey he had taken, from the initial excitement of discovering the house to the terrifying encounters with the cursed mirror. He had not only survived, but also restored dignity to his family legacy. As he reflected, a gentle breeze rustled through the room, carrying a faint whisper. Unlike the sinister whispers of before, this one felt comforting, almost like a thank you. Jack smiled, feeling the presence of Eleanor and the other freed souls. They were at peace, and so was he. Life continued, and Jack embraced his new beginning. He started writing about his experiences, sharing his story with others. His tale of the cursed heirloom and the haunted house captivated readers, and his book became a bestseller. People were inspired by his courage and determination, and many reached out to share their own stories of overcoming fear. Years passed, and the house remained a beloved home. Jack's legacy grew, not just as the man who broke the curse, but as a beacon of hope. The haunted past was now a distant memory, replaced by a future filled with light and possibility. Jack had turned a page not only for himself, but for generations to come.